Hello everyone, Santa here with Let's Make a Game Astral Collision and my update on it. And I think the place to begin, this one is talking about the playtest last week. So, a little bit behind the scenes, I did a playtest on Friday. I normally would record these updates on Monday, but I've decided to move that to Thursday for reasons that will become apparent, i.e. there was just too much stuff I wanted to change and I wanted to get more of it done before I recorded this update. And so let's start with that playtest, because that playtest started a lot of stuff. Let's start with a simple one. So I had made a bestiary last time, and I believe I was discussing it. I have dramatically updated the program for making the bestiary pages. Let's move this to a spot where my face isn't covering it. So I look down at OBS to see if it is. So you'll notice this is dramatically different. In that this is very different. You'll also notice these stats are very different. I will get to that later, because that's a lot of math. But for right now, so the basic discussion that we had with the chat during that playtest, again, there's a link to the most recent playtest in the description below, if I've set everything up correctly. So if you want to go check out that, you can there. But anyway, it was that the way that I was doing things was not entirely clear. It looked like this, roughly, except this is a little bit nicer because these have lines separating stuff and have all of the letter grades lined up rather than being right next to the word, whereas in that previous incarnation, that was not true. This right up here, there's some debug information that's not drawn in the actual final images. So anyway, it was determined that these were not entirely clear, so let's try some different options. One of the things that was discussed was adding some color differentiation. So there's like this, for example, where blue is better than green and red is worse. And green is just kind of central. You can again see what the palette looks like here. These are all the different ranges. So this is, what, greater than 2.5, greater than 2? I don't remember exactly, but this is your good old 100% damage. This is less than 100% down to 0%. And this is greater than 100% above to like 2 or 2.5, or I think this is 2.5 or greater, but I don't remember exactly. But that would be an S grade. So if I click on the air ooze, for example, you'll see wind would be black and immune. Metal and ice would both be getting S's because they're very good. These would be getting D's and F's, all that sort of stuff. Then there's this simple as gradient, which does not work as well in my opinion. It's just too busy. But it gives you a little bit more values. None of these enemies are like, I mean, this one's got a good bit of variance. You can see that it's starting to get a little bit bluish. It's just too color busy. But it's basically trying to take this and turn it into a gradient. You can kind of see here. And then I have the smooth gradient, which is the one that I like the best. This one, in terms of these gradiated colors, more in the other thing. Ooh, this is not visible at all, is it? I wouldn't use this for letter grades. And then sloppy boundaries is just kind of like, let's just take simple, but on either side, let's kind of blend it a little bit. So this is green blended a little bit with red, and then a little bit with blue, and then blue up to kind of blend it a little bit with yellow, which turns out to be purple for some reason. Probably because I'm cutting out the green. But anyway, and this goes towards black. This one's okay, but it's again, it's a little bit colorful. It's a little bit hard to tell what's going on. So if we go back to the giant rat, it looks kind of like that. If we go to, there's other things where it's just like slightly resisted. So like C pluses are slightly greener, and like C minuses, I don't know where I'm going to find a C minus offhand because I don't have these memorized. Cave bats are super boring. I don't know. You get the idea. Like certain colors are going to be like, yeah, here's a C minus. It's like, yeah, this is still mostly fine. It's just slightly worse. So let's just go to simple for the moment. So letters I tried, and I was not entirely like, people were not satisfied with the letters because it's like, this is a little bit unclear and ambiguous. And yeah, I'll grant that. This was not the clearest. So then I was like, okay, well, what if I give things stars? And so you can kind of see this, like, was it 6 stars is fine. If I go to, I don't know, the flame ooze, you can see there's a little black dash here because it's in this for like not effective. This gives you a little bit more information. It's a little bit better, but it's a little hard to like know where the middle line is and all that sort of stuff, especially if things were all black like this. It's like what makes something good. So I tried that. I tried plus and minus. This is super unclear though. So n is just like neutral. So this is like worse. But like the thing that's about this, the problem with this is it's very confusing. This has a bunch of lines. Like what's going on here? It's not very clear. Then there's like percentage. So like this is 10%, 200%, 250%. So this is just giving you the actual like percentage multipliers on things. So if I went to like, I don't know, air ooze, you can see this is 250% and this is 400%. Super weak to ice. It really emphasizes that. Then there's the very similar raw multiplier, which you can see is just like what is the multiplier that's going on here. So it's 2.5 times, 4 times, 1 time, 0 times, that sort of thing. And like this is fine. This gives you the information, but what I also ended up trying was the bar graph. And the bar graph gives you a lot more information. There's kind of a faint line here for the 1 times multiplier. And this I like this solution the best. It does, and then I like the smooth gradient. It helps you kind of be able to parse things, but it's not so busy. You can tell the stuff that's really good. You can tell the stuff that's really bad, but it's not like a bajillion colors getting thrown at you. Like what is it? Sloppy boundaries is just a lot of colors getting thrown at you. Like why is this purple? All that sort of stuff. So smooth gradient is like you can kind of get the connection with things. I feel like it's probably the best one. Again, here's this line at the 1 times multiplier. But what this effectively does is this gives you the real multiplier information, but not the exact values. So it also makes it. It's kind of like how the stars were able to kind of give you some information about like how good things were in a way that, except this is more accurate than the stars were. But in that sort of like, oh, I can quickly at a glance tell what's the best and what's the worst because of that positional information. I'm not having to interpret a number. And so I like that this is like hiding the numbers because I don't necessarily want to give like the raw numbers out. I don't know. I don't know specifically why. I just kind of prefer it to be a little bit more abstract than that. To some extent, the nuance doesn't matter that much if it's like 75 versus 80 or 70. So I don't know. I kind of prefer the ranges. And so this captures like it gives you really precise information. Like if I go back to this air ooze, you'll notice that this line for neutral is like all the way over here because this is the friggin' 400%. So you can tell like this right here, the bar graph. So like if I go to the letters, these are just both S. That doesn't tell you how much more one is than the other. But this does. This right here tells you ice is substantially more effective than metal, which is still really good. And like if stuff is just kind of neutral, like the cave bat, it caps out here, right? It's like at 50%, it's not going to be like full bar green. But if it goes higher, it will scale it down to accommodate room. So that was a big change that I made. This was a big adjustment. I like this style the best. I think this gradient style like captures the information that's relevant, but it doesn't overload you with colors, but does give you a little bit more nuance so you can kind of like pay attention to stuff that's a little bit better, more easily, because it's of contrast. So this is darker and this is brighter. All that good stuff. Yeah. You can see like, oh, this has a lot of resistances. Piercing is good against it though, and metals are real good against it. I don't know. So this is the style that I settled on of being like, I like this style the most for all of these. So that covers that fallout from the playtest, which was basically like the way that I was doing the bestiary in terms of presenting this information was not as great. And I kind of agree with those assessments and have adjusted it dramatically to make it substantially better, at least in my opinion. And I like this bar graph style of presenting this information quite a lot because I think it does a good job of highlighting everything that's relevant without like making you parse a bunch of numbers and stuff. For anybody who was wondering, by the way, this is just tracking mouse coordinates. So that way I could like figure out where do I need to actually be drawing these things and give myself some numbers to work with positionally. That's why it gives the mouse coordinates right up here. It's just within the image. So let's talk about math. So one of the things that the playtest made very clear as I was going through stuff was that I had a balancing problem. Specifically, I had a balanceability problem. And what I mean by that is the way that everything was working was very difficult to understand how to make enemies that were sufficiently threatening to the player. And what I ended up settling on is that there were several different problems. So let's kind of go through them. If I spent time in editing, I would actually list them out. But you know what? We can just go into my playtest notes. Here's new notes. I've got all sorts of stuff I need to still fix here. But can I? No, I would have to actually go. Hopefully this is, oh, nope, that works. Cool. Control, zoom, control, scroll wheel works. Okay, so problem 1. Players were too durable. This was really the main big problem, but also too, it was hard to easily determine how powerful an enemy actually was. So these are two separate problems, but they are related. So players being too durable, this problem right here in my simple way of presenting that. You can see that I had some typos I needed to fix. But my simple way of presenting this, the big way that this became a problem was, so there's a couple of different factors to this. First of all, is figuring out how much damage should enemies actually deal. What does it mean to be a more powerful enemy? But part of it too is from a resource deprivation standpoint. The player team, so let's actually step back. Why would a team lose? Let's start there. A player team is going to lose generally due to two things largely. The first one is attrition. You've run out of resources, you can no longer keep up with the enemy, and now you can no longer effectively resist their offense. So that's reason 1. So that's what we would call pressure. And I'm taking a lot of ideas actually here from Guild Wars 1 stuff that I've had a lot of experience with, where you just encounter pressure. It is a relentless assault against your resources. It is like increasing pressure, and it just pushes against you until you are forced off a cliff. And with those, it looks like you're doing fine until suddenly you're not. And so pressure is one way that you lose. And the other way that you lose is through what would be called spike damage. It's just because you lose when all of your characters die, right? So either they die because you can no longer keep them alive and it's just all of your resources are whittled away, or you lose when all of your team is dead, perhaps because the enemies are dealing very high amounts of damage. And that spike damage, it's, all of the monsters ganging up on one character with really high damage attacks that suddenly just drain all of that character's health instantly, and then they do that again and again and again until nobody's alive anymore. And I was beginning to have to resort to spike damage because pressure was no longer effectively working. So if we come over to here and we look at things, specifically the Flesh Eater, Mind Eater, Soul Eater enemies, you notice they have a skill right here called Life Ender. Life Ender, I've done a lot of tweaks here. We'll get to them later. Life Ender, there is a search function here that I forget about. You'll notice that right here, its damage formula is its target's maximum HP. This is a monster skill that I made to spike out player characters because players were able to tank what those guys were doing way too effectively. And there's a couple of things that contributed to this. One of the big ones was the formula for MP regeneration, because having a high water stat, which was often linked to healing, would also give you more MP regeneration. So what I basically had is a fundamental flaw in some of the backbone of how the game worked. In the combat system, your resources, your ability to sustain, to stand against attrition, to withstand pressure, is baked into largely your ability to keep up with damage. So there's different ways that you can address damage. You can mitigate damage. There are certain ways of doing that. You can also heal damage. And so healing needs to be a certain amount effective because everything takes a turn, right? All actions take a turn to perform. And this is where being able to perform multiple actions in turn can be extremely powerful. And why I kind of would prefer an AP system where you like have a certain amount of AP points you can spend per turn, and that determines the number of actions you can do. But I don't necessarily want to implement that. I don't think it would be too bad to implement, but I'd have to figure out how to get the AI working with that system. And I would also have to figure out a user interface for that system, and I just don't want to deal with all that angle of it in this game, or in this engine. But an AP system would be able to potentially solve the issue. The big thing here that I'm talking about is skills have to be worth a turn to use. And so I want my healing skills to be, worth a turn to use. If they're too weak, then there's no reason to use them. Because I can make them cheaper, but that doesn't necessarily matter, right? MP cost is not necessarily the unit, because the fulcrum for balancing things is does it feel like it's worth a turn to use this skill or not? And if it doesn't feel like it's worth it to use the skill this turn, you're not going to want to use it. So skills have to be strong enough to be worth a turn. Plus, one of the other things I have going on is I kind of want an even balance across my skills and equipment to where it's your level that makes stuff stronger, not the equipment. Not getting stronger equipment that makes you stronger. So the skills, I want like Healing Spring to be just as good early game as it is late game. And so it needs to scale well with your water stat and all that sort of stuff in order to be able to do that. So anyway, there's a couple of things that go into that too. I've dramatically adjusted maximum HP, so that way everything kind of has a consistent value that way. I chose 60 because 60 is highly divisible. It makes it easy to kind of like choose costs that are easy to kind of understand and all that sort of stuff. But I also needed to radically revolutionize how I was handling MP regeneration, because high water characters could spam Healing Spring and instantly recover all of the MP they spent on that. And that made it so that way you could basically, as long as you could keep those characters alive, they would be able to hang on indefinitely. Because you had effectively unlimited resources, it was just a matter of then spike damage having to overcome those resources. And so it was really hard to set up a situation where the players were going to lose a battle of attrition. And I started having to resort to things like, say, spamming Curse. That way your healing spells were dramatically less effective, because Curse lowers healing effectiveness. So I feel like I've talked around this issue quite a bit, but I want to make sure that there's enough context to understand what's going on. I was resorting to spike stuff because pressure wasn't working, and pressure wasn't working because the player had too much sustain. And the player had too much sustain because the water stat gave them too much sustain, and it's hard to kind of decrease from that. So anyway, I decided that what I was going to do was completely redo MP regeneration. Actually, if we go to the code, there's a lot of stuff here to talk about. MP regen? No, I forget exactly what the function is called. We'll get to so many things. I regenerate MP right here. So this I've dramatically changed. I adjusted the cap to 20, but this is also a raw value. This function no longer cares about your water stat, and instead it just takes 100 times your MP regen, which makes it a flat value. So it doesn't care how much maximum MP you have. It's always just this amount, plus 3. So you have a base regen of 3. And this is how much regen you have. You can't have more than regenning 20 MP a turn. It's going to be hard to get there anyway. And I may lower it from 20 to 15. You can't lose more than 15 or more than 20 a turn either. But basically you have a base 3, and then anything that gives you more MP regen is going to be on a 1 MP per percentage point basis. And I changed to the system so that way I can effectively attrition you out. And again, I've also done a bunch of other things. So that was kind of the first angle of player over durability, is players just had too much sustain factor. It meant that pressure was not an effective way of destroying groups, and it meant that I was effectively having to rely on the only thing that would work was spike pressure, or was spike damage. So I had to start resorting to things that just dealt way too much damage in order to be able to take characters out now. you are, and like, the thing is, I want pressure to be kind of an effective strategy. I've limited healing potions to only 25% of your HP, and then it's the remaining 75% is healed through an HP regeneration buff. You only get so many resurrections, generally speaking. Like, there's a resurrection item, but you're limited in how many of them you get. And it's a really effective item, but, you know, it's probably going to be more effective than any skill that resurrects. And it happens fast, and a lot of the resurrection skills are probably going to need to be slow and stuff like that. So there's just a lot of stuff where, and like, the other thing too is I could have made the players more vulnerable by making healing slower, but I don't necessarily want to make healing slower. I want it to be fast, that way it's reliable. But that also kind of contributed to the problem. So there's a lot of different factors that are making players too durable. That whole problem also made it hard to determine how powerful an enemy actually was. So there's a lot of other factors that went into it too. If you were there for the playtest or you watched the VOD of it, one of the things that you saw is I spent a lot of time trying to tweak the encounter with the skeletons and the enticer into a reasonable place. So if we go into troops, and I scroll through this, we got this encounter right here, which is 7 of the enticed and an ancient enticer. This was an incredibly powerful group because the skeletons were way too strong. And this goes back to, it's really hard to determine how powerful things were. This ended up being able to have enough pressure per turn to destroy the player. So I had to like tweak a bunch of stuff and all sorts of things. So to try to get this into a reasonable spot, I'm going to have to do that again, but never mind that. So it was really hard to determine what balance was. And so what I decided I wanted to do is I wanted to try to address some way of handling this. So enter, is it this one? Yes, the Astral Collision Calculator program. I'm not going to go through all the code here. It's not necessary, but I will show you what this program does. It does a lot of math is what it does. So let me take you on a journey. Here is a graph. It is a lovely graph. I know it's a little bit thin. I guess I could thicken up these lines for purposes of YouTube video. That wouldn't be hard. Let's go thicken up those lines. Let's see, it's in this calculator. Yeah, this is the one that matters. So like, what is it? Watch as I code in real time. It's exciting. Let's just increase the width to 3. That's going to be pretty chunky lines. Oh, yeah, that blue one isn't used. It was obvious what it would do after I did it. So let me take you on this journey. Yeah, here's nice thicker lines so that way you can see them more easily. So this is an exponential graph for those who may not be familiar. So I was kind of trying to think through, and there's a whole process I use this kind of work through stuff on. I basically had this idea in my head that what I wanted was enemies about 5 levels above you to one-shot you, kind of on average. I wanted something where it's like, this enemy is super threatening. You can't really fight against it yet. You have to come back. Like, death is super unpunishing in my game. It just takes your party back to the last place where you interacted with the Resurrection Signet Monument thing. So death is very non-punishing in this game. Like, game over is a very minor thing. It's not game over in the traditional RPG sense where you reload your save and all that sort of stuff. So I'm okay with having enemies that you shouldn't fight yet, and like Dark Souls, if you wander into the graveyard and get beat up by skeletons, you know not to go in the graveyard yet. And so I was trying to figure out, like, okay, about what do I want, and I was like, I decided that I wanted enemies on average to 3-shot the player. And so that's where you get this at-level stuff down here. Sorry, this is a little small, but you'll see damage minimum is 34, damage maximum is 49, HP is 100. So this is the damage range. 34 damage 3 times is going to kill the player, and 49 damage twice is not, but 3 times will. So that gives me a damage range. Now you'll see this 5 above right here is not necessarily representing lethal. The reason for that is because I tweaked numbers to make the graph not absolutely ridiculous. So if I actually close out of this, I did a change. Where was it? It was Yeah, the fractional line ended up, it was at 1/3. So basically, I decided I wanted standard attacks to, on average, 3-shot the player. And that sort of, okay, where is this math being done? That sort of, oh, it's the function that calculates HP. Yeah, right here. Let's just comment this out. So if I switch my commenting to be like this will properly do it. Okay. Now when we run this again, you'll notice this graph is a lot more sloped. So right here, 5 levels above, min damage is 100, max damage is 149. So that's going to one-shot the player with 100 HP. That's kind of where I kind of settled. Now, this graph is normalized. So we'll show a problem that came up. But basically, I was like sitting down, I was trying a bunch of different stuff with linear equations, and they didn't work because fundamentally that's not how linear equation works. So I realized as I was thinking through it, oh, this is actually an exponential equation. The equation actually right here that's written out is base HP times 3 to the level minus 1 over the levels out, basically however far out that I wanted it to one-shot. So with 5, it would be 5. We're looking at this guy right here. So what this means is that, like, if I jump this up, like, eventually this is where I figured out that it would be. So if I jump this up to like level 6, you'll notice that, okay, we now have 300 HP at level 6. At level 1, we have 100 HP. At level 5, we have 900 HP. This is going to, a third of 900 is going to one-shot you. So basically, everything's now going to be balanced around HP level. The problem that I realized with this is that as soon as I realized it's an exponential equation, I'm like, oh, that's going to get way too big. So just for demonstration's sake, level 99, right, max level, here's how much HP you have at level 99. If you can't read that number very effectively, it is 224,686,299,952. Needless to say, this is a ludicrous amount of HP and is way too big. So what I ended up doing was I messed around with this until I figured out that I wanted the levels out to be 24, giving you 8,877 HP, much more reasonable number. But basically what this means is every 24 levels, the average damage that enemies should deal should triple, approximately. And so I just kind of like have balanced everything around this idea of the average kill should be 3 shots. So like if there's 3 enemies, they could one-shot a character, sort of thing, if they all target the same thing. I'm going to need to rebalance a lot of stuff, and this is a base HP of 100. This HP per level was when I was trying to do a linear thing, and it didn't work because of course it didn't. What ended up happening is it would work down here, and then as you got up higher and higher, it drifted off because it would be a line instead of this curve that lets it stay on. So like if I adjust this, it has refresh issues, but you'll notice this line right here measures where it goes to, like that keeps going that way. There's also supposed to be one going that way, but we need to drop down a bit before, yeah, we can see this one going out here. So this was kind of like the approach that I took. I wanted to adjust things so that way the player character was like based around this math here. Is based around this idea of you have this amount of HP, enemies are able to do this much damage to you, like at a baseline sort of level of things, because that's what I was going to then balance the game around. I didn't have a method of balancing the game around something before, which was a problem. It's why I had a hard time parsing what enemies should look like, all sorts of stuff. So I made this change, and I'm in the process of implementing this change. It's a huge change. It's going to require me to rejigger a bunch of things. It's going to require me to redo weapon damage formulas. It's going to require me to like redo a bunch of equipment, because equipment should generally not give you, like, there's 2 things going on here. One, first of all, I don't want you to be able to like stack a ton of extra MP, because I want to be able to balance skills around like how much MP they cost. And that's really hard to do if you can stack MP up to like 500 MP. So MP is now kind of being set at like 60. Baseline And then MP regen, baseline of 3. I can now balance MP costs around that because, again, skills you get at the beginning of the game supposed to be just as effective at the end of the game. I'm having to like redo weapon formulas so that way weapons aren't dealing as much so that way they're dealing damage kind of in line with this formula because enemies are going to be based around this as well. You should be approximately 3-shotting enemies with just standard attack commands. Now it's probably going to turn out to be that you more like 2-shot enemies if your character's better at attacking, but I digress. So with that idea in place, I made a stats calculator. And the idea here is that this would allow me to be able to calculate out what my stats are. So I took this idea of, okay, if I'm basing most weapons off of 2 stats, how should I figure out what my stats are? And I decided that I would take the HP that you get at specific level X, and then if you have 2 stats, then let's have the stats be on average a quarter. So if I were to add those 2 stats together, they would add up to being a quarter of your maximum HP. So that way there's a little bit of wiggle room for plus damage on weapons and stuff like that. And this would mean then that you get up to a third off of 2 stats. So it's a quarter plus, what is it at that point? Like, that's 3/12. So to get up to a third, you'd add another 12th on or something like that. And then you have 6 stats, so those are 2 stats being used. It works out to be 3/4 because of math, and I don't... To kind of try to spell it out a little bit, 1/4 times 6 stats, but we're using 2 for the quarter, so that's 6/2. That's 3 times 1/4 is 3/4. So that's where we get this stat fraction total right here, and it defaults to 1/8 in each stat because 1/8 times 6/8, 6 stats, 1/8 each, is 3/4. So then this allows me to be able to generate like what your stats should be. So like, let's say you have slightly worse strength and have slightly better dexterity, like this, right? So now you're at 75% again. Your strength stat at level 1 would be 10, and dexterity would be 15. Stuff like that. So I just did this for all of the various characters. I can see what they are at various levels. So as I go up in levels, I get more HP. Again, all of the stats are now a fraction of your HP. Everything is balanced around your HP figure that I calculate out according to this curve right here. So that's how all of that math is being done. And then there's this button right here called Calc JSON. It just does this, just fills this in. The idea here is I did not want to have to go into RPG Maker and go to my classes and enter in all of these numbers manually. Now you'll notice a lot of these are maxing out. This editor only goes up to 999. These stats are, well, if we look, calculator, if we look at level 99, you'll see that these are easily going over 1,000. Like, that's just how the curve goes. So this doesn't actually affect anything in the editor, but it also would mean I could not enter them in the editor. But basically, I output the JSON array here, and then I can go, this is going to ask me to reload. Yes. You can see that all of these values are now being loaded in. This is the JSON file. This is where everything is stored. And this is the angel doesn't have anything. So here we have our warrior, or our knight class. So you can see here is a 1,287. But basically, this function this is the level at which I'm going to things. This generates the JSON array. I copy and paste this into this area, this params thing from here to here, and I just overwrite the values that it generates with my values that I'm generating with this program. So that way I don't have to manually enter in all of these levels. This is how this stuff is stored. Yes, I'm getting into the deep guts of RPG Maker. That's just how it's going. I kind of joked on Twitter, at Ciantier, for anybody who cares, the other day that at the current rate that I'm going to be like writing my own editor to do this instead of using the RPG Maker editor. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but I'm certainly trending that way. So this was just an easier way of like updating all of the stats than trying to do that. I do need to update the enemy builder in order to kind of accommodate this. But this is how I built and adjusted the stats of all of the characters, as we went deep into the math over here and just like put in numbers, put in multipliers, and then calculated stuff out here and filled it in. And now when we go over here, we get all these lovely curves on all of these. On all of these, and you'll notice max MP is a flat line because it's just 60, just across the board. And you can see HP following this curve because everybody has the exact same HP, right? But it's all the other values that are different. Like the Berserker has real bad water, really bad water. I forget the values that I put in for that. If I need to change things, I'll tweak stuff later. Okay, so that is covering sort of the stat rework. Again, I'm reworking stuff with the enemies, so this is in progress. Hi, Visual Studio. It is not there yet. It needs a lot more tweaking. I'll probably do that later. This whole thing right here is going to need to be reworked. I have adjusted some of the values here. I have adjusted how it's allocating stuff. So if I just give stuff an average threat thing and randomize the stats, level 1 it'll have 100 HP. It allocates the stats accordingly. It generates like 75 stat points across everything because that's how it works, approximately. If I jumped this up in levels to say like level 21 and hit randomize stats, it would, again, base it on that sort of thing. I want to redo how I'm doing a lot of this. I want it to use the percentage things here. I want additional stuff for adjusting things. This is no longer relevant information over here to an extent. And some of the math over here, I did something that like dramatically screwed up how it was calculating the damage, and I need to figure out what I did there because it's reporting horrendously incorrect values. I did add this copy damage and critical text, so I can just hit this button and it copies these 3 things, so I can paste them into the thing and puts it on the clipboard. But yeah, this needs a bunch of additional work because I changed something else too. So one of the other things with the way that the damage formula worked, if we go over to here, over to AC modifications, there's a bunch of other things. I've changed what stats do. So like you no longer get base HP regen off of your Earth stat. Speed. Let's just go through changes this file to an extent. So speed is now based off of. Let's actually do this. I don't like it this big for normal use, but it makes it easier to read on YouTube, so I'll suffer with it. So speed now applies your attack speed to any action that you take, not just attacking. And then if the individual item, this item here just means your skill or an item that you're using or whatever, the speed value on that. So if we go over to here and we go to skills as an example, this has a speed. Items have a speed. It's just that stat. It just grabs that value. So like Life Ender was real fast. For example, Fireball is like a bit faster. So that's just like, hey, is this a thing that I can go grab? I'm going to go grab that. It takes 50. This right here, what this math does is it takes your TP rate and your MP rate. So this is them as percentages or as 0 to 1 values. So like, what is your current TP divided by your maximum TP? What is your current MP divided by your maximum MP? Adds them together and subtracts 0.5 and multiplies them by 50. The basic idea here is if you have high TP and MP, then you're faster. If you have low, then you're slower. That's all that really means. So as the battle goes on and your resources wear out, you're going to get slower. If you restore your MP, if you just attack things, you'll be faster because it will let your MP regenerate and it will fill up your TP, and that will work on this multiplier. And then your attack speed factors in, and your the items, the skills, or whatever's speed factors in here as well. So I adjusted this formula. HP no longer works off of Earth, but otherwise this is unchanged. It caps at a quarter of your maximum HP in regeneration or degeneration, so you can't degen or regen more than that. So like rejuvenation plus a potion is redundant because a potion's regen is 25, unless you have degen going on. The MP stuff I already talked about. I changed how we calculate max TP. Instead of basing it, because this is what I used to do. I used to base it off of your strength and your dexterity and your fire stat. Instead of doing that, I wanted it to not be based on your stats anymore. I wanted it to just kind of be its own free-floating thing. It is now based off of your MP regen. So based off of equipment, you should have an MP regen. Because again, I adjusted this, and I'm doing a bunch of stuff with armor and equipment, and I'll talk about that later. This is going to be a long video, everyone, because there's just too many changes to talk about, and too much like thought process behind it to explain to make this concise. So your equipment, your default regen is 3. Equipment should boost your regen up by up to 3. So actually, we can. Is it playtesting notes? I think I talked about this. No, I did, and then I deleted it because I did it. Okay, we'll not worry about that either. But actually, you know what? Let's just bring this up. There's stuff here I'll talk about later. Here's reflective analysis. Here's where I was kind of working through and being like, okay, this is the amount of additional MP regen that these things give. I thought I was going to have a base regen of 5. I decided to change it to 3 because that makes math work out nicer in terms of fractional percentages of 60. These are the factors of 60, by the way, for anybody who wanted to know them. So tunics give you 2 regen, body armor and plate mail will give you 0, robes will give you 3, jackets and dresses will also give you 2, and gambeson will give you 1. So, and that's going to factor into other stuff that we'll talk about later. But basically, that means that you're going to have a regen max of 3 to 6 on average based on equipment without like other effects that may be adjusting it. And so your maximum TP is based on the regen that you have. The more regen you have, the less maximum TP. As the comment here says, the range of TP that you have is 40 to 160. Based on your regen, I basically take your 0.06 minus your regen. So your regen is going to be like this value is going to be 0. Actually, this needs to be like 0.3. I'll think about this in a moment, but your actual regen stat is going to be. So if you have +3 regen, yeah, this needs to be 0.3. Right? Yeah, I think. Between 0 and 6. So if you have 0 regen, yeah, so if you have -3 regen, that would be 0 regen, which would, yeah, okay, I think I wanted that to be 0.3. Hey, we found a bug. So if you have 0 regen, then this is going to be 0.03 times 2,000. Knock a couple zeros off of here to get down to 20. And to get 3, that's going to be 60. It's going to get you 100 TP base. So base TP is 100. If you go negative on your regen down to 0, it's going to boost it up to 160 TP max. If you get more MP regen, so like if I have 3 here, this is going to be 0. That's just going to leave you at 40 maximum TP. So that's how that's going to be working. So I decided I wanted to base your TP maximum off of, basically if you're getting more MP regeneration, then you can't max your TP out as high, which means that skills that require more TP you might not be able to use, is the basic idea of what's going on here. So there's a little bit of a trade-off between maximum TP and MP regen. Okay, so that was a change that I made. Then I wanted to redo the way I was handling damage and accuracy. Yeah, there's some stuff going on here. So if I kind of back up a little bit, let's just take these things kind of a little bit of piece at a time. This right here, I decided to add this meta tag for uses weapon. So if you use a weapon, I will calculate your weapon stuff right here. You'll notice an accuracy stat. I will get to accuracy in a moment because I redid how that worked for reasons I'll explain when I get to it. So I just calculate your weapon, and then the times the element rate. So your weapon is affected by armor. But then I evaluate your damage formula. So this means that this is armor ignoring. This ignores element rate. This will allow, for example, attack skills to get through slimes. So if we remember, do I still have the Bestiary? Yes. So if we go look at Earth and Ooze, see this Earth stat? You could still get damage in on this if you use an attack skill that deals plus damage, because it will push through there. Or like you're slashing, if you use Valiant Strike or Power Attack, for example, on a character, that amount of plus damage will push through this resistance. So it's a way to be able to allow you to get through stuff. It works similarly to what's going on in Guild Wars 1 with plus attack damage on weapons, where it just ignores armor. If you're using specifically the meta.uses a weapon tag on your skills. So, for example, if I go to Power Attack, you'll see it now uses weapon true. The value here doesn't matter. I'm just checking, does this tag exist? But, don't put false there. I don't think it works, because I think that'll make it false. But anyway, basically, if it exists, then it does this. Otherwise, it just does the thing it always does. Now, I have done a couple of things here. Fire and strength will no longer increase the damage that you push through. They do other things, but I didn't want to do stuff with that anymore, because relative strength values could basically because your stats also increase at an exponential, because your stats are based off of this curve right here. Because your stats are effectively based off of this curve, it's kind of like trailing down here for the average. But because they're based off of this curve, your stats are going to be doing more and more. So that would basically do very little down here and do a lot up here. So I just scrapped the system. This is whatever. It now has accuracy. So right here is the first place where stuff is really different. So one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to change the way that I was calculating out hits. Well, this stuff is useful to talk about, but I guess I'll mention this right here. Your dexterity affects your evasion, and your water is now affecting your magical evasion. And your dexterity is improving your accuracy for physical attacks, and your accuracy for spells is being improved by fire, your fire stat. Accuracy for spells here is now being affected by your critical rate. And then variance is now being added onto accuracy instead of critical rate. I'll get into what's happening there in a moment. This critical function is now being not used. So apply is where we start doing some math. So I had a whole system here. In fact, this system right here that's commented out, that calculated out like a hit multiplier, and if it did stuff with that, and if the accuracy was less than 10%, it was a miss, and then if it wasn't a miss, it would subtract the evasion, and if that was less than 10%, it was evaded, and then if it wasn't, like if it was a hit, then we would do some stuff and we'd multiply that hit multiplier times the damage that you'd produce, and that would be kind of like how the accuracy system worked. I like that system, but I felt that I had too many randomnesses going on, because just attacking with a weapon is inherently random. If you may recall, when we go up here, this formula is going to be changed a little bit. But I calculated damage high and low, and before I would just roll a random value between that. Now we're interpolating based on accuracy. I'll cover that in a moment. Yeah, so here. So I felt that I had too many random things going on. I had the randomness of your critical hit. I had the randomness of the range on weapons. Like I built in a range on them, so they deal like, I don't know, 60 to 80 damage is what I use, kind of the classic example. That's where I kind of like started stuff on the sword, is 60 to 80 damage, some value in there. And then I had this accuracy randomness. I felt that was too much randomness. It would make things too inconsistent. So I decided to go to a different system to kind of work with that. And the way that works is right in here. So let's kind of go over this code. I have a hit rate that I get off of this I have an evasion rate that I get off of this. Note that if certain hit stuff has an evasion rate of 0, which I think actually means in my system now that it's possible if your accuracy is too low that certain hit may not be certain. I'm not quite sure how it does stuff. Elsewhere, it may just say, oh, it works regardless. I don't know. But we calculate here the accuracy. And this formula right here works to basically say, hey, if we take your hit rate plus your evasion times a math.random minus your evasion rate. So what this does is this creates kind of a range. Actually, I did some stuff here on it. I think over math overview. Yeah, right here. So I did some stuff here on it. So if you have an accuracy of, say, 1 and an evasion of 1, then your range, I forget. Oh, I was testing out 2 different methods. I went with this one. Your range minimum is -1. Your range maximum is 1. Your average is 0. Your evasion chance is 0.5. Your critical chance is 0. And this is based on this. I can put in a different RNG, like 0.5 is going to be that. 0.3 is going to be that. 0.7 is going to be that. Stuff like that. So what's happening here is the idea is if you have more evasion than that, like lets you, it basically rolls negative evasion to your accuracy. So we see here if I have an evasion of not negative of 0.1, then my minimum is -0.1, my maximum is 1, my evasion chance is 1 in 11. That's what 0.09 repeating is an 11th. And like if I have an RNG of 0, it's evaded. If I have an RNG of like 0.1, it's just barely a hit. So this kind of generates a range. This does make it actually easier to evade stuff. But that's what's going on here is this is generating the random value in that range. Evasion is a positive number, so I'm just adding these together in order to kind of get the full breadth of the range and then subtracting off the evasion rate to reduce it down to where it's supposed to be. If this accuracy result is less than 0, it's a miss or evaded. I decided it's a miss if your hit rate is less than 0, and otherwise it's an evaded. It's very unlikely to miss. You have to have a very, very low hit rate in order to be able to miss. But you can, like blind, I think gives you a negative enough that you'll basically like miss every time with it now. And then, unless you have really high hit rate. And then if it's a hit, what we do is I determine if it's a critical hit. So if this thing can critical hit, then whether or not it's a critical is accuracy -1 is greater than the target.CEV. CEV is critical evasion rate. So what this is basically doing is it's saying if your accuracy result is greater than 100%, then check it against the target's critical evasion rate. If the amount that you exceeded 100% by is greater than the target's critical evasion rate, then it is a critical hit. So in other words, you roll accuracy, and it's based on your accuracy rating, your hit rate, and the enemy's evasion rate. If you are less than 0, you miss, or you fail to hit. Either it was evaded or you miss. Probably is evaded. If it's greater than 100, then it might be a critical hit. If the enemy has critical evasion, it's harder to critical hit them because you have to exceed, like you have to have a very high accuracy to be able to have a chance of landing a critical hit that against enemies with high critical evasion. Is basically how that works. If you have a low, so this is why I'm not using the critical rate stat anymore for this. I'm using it for magic accuracy because this is how I'm determining critical hits. But critical evasion still is relevant here, as you can see off of this. So this is basically saying, hey, we take our accuracy result -1. If it's greater than, I could have just easily done is accuracy greater than 1 plus the target.CEV, because this is critical evasion. If I go to, I don't know, an enemy, it's one of these parameters. Most of the time, it's 0. So if this is like 5%, then you have to have more than a 1.06 accuracy. So that's how critical hits are working now. And then I report this information to the make damage value function. I execute the damage on that value, and that's how that's working now. Now, what I do with accuracy, which I alluded to earlier, is up here, the damage range, if it's not a critical hit, the damage range is interpolated based on your accuracy, which this is just taking a value between 0 and 1. It clamps it, so if you got a critical hit, it's not, like, it'd ignore this anyway. But, you know, if you got, but you could still have accuracy. Like, if they had high CEV, I don't want this to go above 1. So this is basically interpolating between your low and your high, and it's rounding it as clamping kind of in between. So what that basically means is if you have an accuracy hit of 0, you'll deal your minimum damage. It won't be a miss. It's only a miss if it's below 0. It won't be a miss. If you have a hit of 100% or greater, it's going to deal your maximum damage. If it's somewhere in between, it's going to be scaled wherever that in-between value is. So if it's like a 60% accuracy result from your RNG, so if we go back to the notes to where I have this, like this right here would basically be doing your minimum damage. If I had a 0.5 here, this is 0.45. So this is going to be 45% of the way from your minimum damage to your maximum damage, and that's how much damage you deal. Hopefully that's explained that well enough. The idea here is that this makes it so that way your, you can see, no, it's kind of under my face, but right here, here's where I was kind of doing the stat average thing. So the idea behind this formula is it's more consistent. Your accuracy determines how hard your weapon hits. And I'm not having like 3 different rolls to determine like how much damage you do. I'm not having the accuracy roll and the range on your weapon roll and critical hit roll. It's all kind of like rolled into the same single call to the RNG. And I need more consistent damage values so that way my 3-shot stuff works out properly. What that means is that I've added accuracy for spells in a way that should hopefully make stuff more interesting there. I haven't fully fleshed out how I'm going to do all that stuff yet. But, you know, I'm kind of working on that process. Let's see. So your magical evasion is boosted by water. Your magical accuracy is boosted by fire. Your physical evasion is boosted by dexterity and countered by dexterity. Strength is used. It's used for reducing damage taken while guarding. Right here. This is strength or attack, whichever. I've overloaded these things by doing this, by the way. It's just like attack and strength, mat and fire. So the damage that you take while guarding is reduced by your half your strength stat. It's just raw subtracted off. So having more strength makes guarding more effective. I don't know that I've done a whole lot down here. I'm just going to scroll through a little bit just to see if I did. I don't think I did, though. So I need to, oh yeah, TP is now like constant. It just is like, yeah, okay, so here's something else I did. Okay, good thing I was scrolling down. So right here on battle start, if you don't have preserve TP, it initializes your TP, which is just set to 10. And then it adds, you gain TP equal to half of your wind stat. So having more wind starts you off with more TP. And then at the end of battle, you gain half of your MP back, and you regain HP equal to 1.5 times your Earth stat. So this will, at the end of battle, you get healed a bit. I wanted to kind of do that because I feel like it simplifies the kind of in-between battle process a little. So that's what Earth does now. And this one I didn't want to scale with any stat because your MP doesn't scale with any stat. I think that's the main thing. I did have to adjust the status block, the status thing, to report spell accuracy instead of reporting physical accuracy. Right now, Accuracy will help expand the range, and critical spells will require you to have over 100 accuracy for getting crits as well, based on and 100 plus their critical evasion. But I modified this to have spell accuracy. Various equipment's going to give you more spell accuracy, like staves, like magical stuff will give you more spell accuracy. I don't think I had to do much here with anything. This is the function for opening the bestiary. One of the other things that we decided is this was, we already decided that was too complicated, so it just has the excelled in that text. I do want to add an additional thing there. Oh, I had to change the stat maximum to support values above 999. Okay, so things that I'm kind of working on, I am rejiggering a lot of equipment. I need to go in here in weapon planning. You'll see that this now has this average value and this value, and scales these things based on level. This should probably actually floor. I think the actual thing floors. But if I enter 99 here, it'll appropriately level up your maximum HP and these sort of base values. Good job, sword. You're looking mighty massive today. These values are all going to need to be modified. The average is supposed to be at level 99, 3,698 damage, and some of these weapons are greatly exceeding that, like the axe. Some of these weapons aren't even getting close, like the flintlock, which maths. I might not have actually entered in the exact way that it maths, but anyway, I'm going to need to go through this and update all of the weapons to kind of work properly for this range. That's going to be a process. I haven't started that one yet because I've been looking at armor. I want to handle armor differently as well. So I've been working on this to kind of redo this and what they kind of do. So I want tunic to give you tunics are tunics are tunics. They can have additional effects, but all tunics should give you plus 20% to your physical and magical evasion, but no inherent damage reduction and 2 MP regen. Plate mail is reducing striking, slashing, and piercing damage by 50%. Fire, water, wind, and earth by 25%. Gives you 200% target rate, 110% guard ability, but no additional MP regen. And can have other effects. I want to also do a thing where I'm putting some consistent nomenclature on things. So duelist equipment is going to improve counterattack chance, for example. I know that. I want to come up with several other things. So I've been working on making more consistent plans for what these things are going to be. The cape is going to not necessarily have a consistent thing, but it's Traveler's Cape will do this, Duelist Cape will do that, things like that. I'm making rings have more of a trade-off. They boost one stat and cost of another instead of just a raw 20%. This, by the way, right here was figuring out, this is just 3 to the 12th and 3 to the 24th, or 1 over 24. This is roughly 5% boost. This is roughly 10% boost. So this is a 1 level, increasing a stat by 1 level, increasing a stat by 2 levels, relative to our lovely graph here. This graph is controlling all of the balancing, is what I'm saying. So us figuring out, okay, what should a full helmet be? What should a hat be? What should a circlet be? Combs, I'm happy with where they're at. There's not going to be a whole lot of them. It's like a comb that you put in your hair, and they're going to have effects. Headbands are going to all preserve TP, and then they can do additional things. I'll do stuff with goggles. Our shields, this should have a thing at the bottom. Focuses, all that sort of stuff. So I'm just kind of rejiggering all of this for all of these equipment things. Different types of necklaces. The silver necklaces grant condition immunity. Amulets debuff immunity. Lockets are going to give you a skill. Yeah. So I'm in the process of figuring out what all this is going to look like and whatnot. I want to give you no maximum or minimal increase to HP off of these things. Before I was trying to because that's one of the other things too, is I was having the player durability kind of based on 2 factors. I was having it based on armor would increase your maximum HP, but it would also reduce damage you take from certain types. And I decided it should mostly just reduce damage you take from certain types to just function as armor. And just have armor be your multiplier to state or to elements, your element rate, and then have not granting more HP, so that way I can kind of maintain things, because one of the things that happens is durability, like just raw durability, is influenced by like regeneration, like your raw HP regeneration rate. Like if we're just talking about health right here, right? Your maximum, your regeneration rate, and your damage reduction. So more damage reduction makes your HP go further. Your regeneration rate makes it so that way it takes longer to like wear it all down. And the maximum that you have determines how much it needs to be worn down. So you can increase durability by increasing maximum HP or reducing damage taken, or by increasing regen. So I've like cut down on regen. I have put a more specific cap on maximum, and I'm just focusing on just one of those factors for improving player durability. Technically, evasion also improves durability in a sort of abstract way. It expands the like scale, so that way the average roll for damage is more likely to be lower. So on average, attacks are going to deal less damage to you, off of accuracy reasons, and also the chance to just like mitigate it all by evading, which is going to happen more often in this system again. And then the other thing is like it lowers that thing. But I want to basically focus on like damage mitigation, not increasing both health and giving damage mitigation, which is what I was doing before, which also exacerbates the durability problem. So I'm trying to like streamline a lot of these systems. I'm trying to make things a lot more uniform, a lot more consistent. It's just kind of a process of like how I work is I kind of like, I build something and then I have to figure out what it means, and then I need to figure out how it needs to get tweaked. And so it's just kind of like a process. And so I'm in a big tweak phase of like, let's kind of reconfigure how the stuff is being done so that way I have something that's easier and more consistent to work with. And so that's kind of the process that I'm in right now. And so does that cover everything? I don't even know. Everyone. There's been some bug fixes. I'll be doing a big playtest tomorrow, but that's going to be in the past for you, so you should be able to find that on the channel as well. According to this, it will be on the 17th, so look for the VOD from April 17th, 2020 if you want to see that playtest in actual action. But I feel like I've probably gone on long enough. Did I miss something? Probably. I've been tweaking underlying stuff. I don't even know anymore. I've talked long enough. Like most of what I've been focusing on is like just reworking a bunch of things. I'm setting stuff up here to like specifically be like, here's templates for stuff, so I can copy paste things more easily. I'm going to be doing that process to weapons as well, down to this scythe, I guess, because then the scimitars are all kind of designed the way that they need to be. But it's a whole process. I should add that if you have an accuracy rating of less than 100%, you cannot critical hit, and you limit the maximum amount of damage your weapon can deal based on like X% of the way to your maximum of your accuracy. So boosting accuracy is going to be really useful. So that makes carrots better, and the lucky clover. So that's cool. I guess I can kind of show you what stuff looks like in game real quick. I removed a bunch of the old save files because they no longer are relevant. So I just started up a file to like test stuff, so you can see like, oh, my stats are a lot lower now for the most part, and like now I have physical accuracy and spell accuracy, and everybody has like 60. Okay, not all of the equipment has been properly modified yet, so this tattered dress is giving too much. It's giving you maximum MP and HP, and like same with this old Gambison is giving you HP. I need to tweak that stuff, obviously. I'm still in the process of doing things, but I need to record this video sometime. So we recorded it sometime. A lot of stuff is going to need to be tweaked. But if I go back in here where I know I can fight these enemies okay. Let's get this cursor off. And I encounter some bats. Like, this properly does its damage over and beyond the thing. She's always going to be really fast. This Phantom Kunai will just, like, wreck things. Yeah. I don't know what spell accuracy should do yet. Oh, see, that bat has an evasion. I evaded both of her attacks. That was just kind of unlucky. I don't think it has that high of an evasion rate. But you can see things actually get evaded sometimes. That enemy has, like, what? It's a cave bat. I don't even know where cave bats are on this thing. I found the cave scorpion. The forest spider. Oh, here's the cave bat. It has 10% evasion rate, so I just got unlucky. So a lot of these things are going to need to be tweaked. A lot of these enemies are going to need to be tweaked. A lot of the hit rates are probably going to go up. Enemies are probably generally going to have above 100% hit rates. That way they can have a chance to critical hit. And all sorts of stuff. There's just going to be a huge rebalancing. But that's kind of like what combat looks like. And I don't know. I can use skills, I guess. And I got MP back on Sophia after the end of battle, so she's no longer down some. Stuff like that. And like I said, I cleared out all of the previous save files because all of these things are getting rejiggered. I moved items around and all sorts of stuff. Okay, I think I have exhausted everything extensively. There's probably something I'm missing. I don't know. I'm going to wrap up here and get back to figuring out stuff and tweaking numbers and working on recalibrating enemies. So that's exciting. So until next time, everyone. Thank you very much for watching, for sticking with me for this super long hour and 10-minute-ish video. But massive changes, huge changes, redoing a ton of stuff because it was really hard to balance the game previously, and I needed to address some of those things. And I have now, so or I'm in the process of doing so. So thank you all for watching. You can ask questions below if you want, and there will be a playtest VOD or something. I don't know. You can go look at playtest VODs, or you can come drop by for the next one. There's a link to my Twitch channel below for all of that information. Okay, I'm rambling. Bye.